Hi there, this is Alison Stoll again from the Children's Advocacy Center of North and Northwest Cook County, continuing talking about domestic violence awareness and how does that impact all of us collectively, not just those survivors and victims of direct domestic abuse, domestic violence or abuse. So today we kind of wanted to tackle some myths and facts that are related to child development and child exposure to abuse and neglect and violence. Oftentimes, people will hold the belief that children are too young to understand what's going on around them, and that so the exposure to repeated police coming in to resolve disputes or fighting or breaking things that they won't remember, they're too young. Again, that hits the second bullet point of they're not going to remember what happened. And another thing is too, that is a common misbelief, is that kids are very difficult to help. It's hard to reach them. We typically do a lot of therapy is really seen as like talk therapy. So how can we expect a child to have a conversation about this? They don't have the same language skills as adults. And then the final one says that kids should just forget about it. I really wish that that forget about it piece was challenged more often, because I think that when someone is exposed to trauma, it's very difficult to forget about it. Even once it's processed and integrated, even as an adult, you don't forget about it. What happens is it becomes less all-consuming. And so for adults, a lot of times once they process and integrate their experience through therapy, they don't forget about it. It's just that their life becomes more important. So the maladaptive coping skills or symptomology of PTSD or whatever they're struggling with kind of falls to the background. And then in the foreground, they get to be immersed in their life, feeling, all the array of feelings and spectrum of feelings, as well as kind of engaging in relationships that are generally safe. So to challenge these commonly held misbeliefs are kind of three straight up facts. All children, regardless of age, are affected by witnessing violence or experiencing abuse or neglect. So one of the cool things about the Children's Advocacy Center is we do have that Safe from the Start programming, which is specifically geared towards children who are 0 to birth to 5. And it works with not only the child, but the caregiver as well, to help with rebuilding that attachment and attunement within a relationship. Why is that so important? Is because of the second bullet point. The younger the child, the more likely they will show signs of distress. Why that is that children learn to regulate themselves through their relationship with their caregiver. So if their caregiver is in a relationship that is surrounded by violence or abuse or neglect, then the child learns to, again, even in that instance, the child will still regulate with the parent, but what happens is they become regulated to be dysregulated, if that makes sense. And so the Safe from the Start program that we offer really helps get to the root of that. So to help the caregiver and child be able to not only connect, but also connect and be regulated instead of connect through dysregulation. And children in general, generally speaking, the last point, do have more trouble understanding and coping with violence. A large part of that is not because we want them to forget about it or because we can't help them. It's because in traditional talk therapy, that may not be the most useful way to reach a child. If you think about a child in normal development, they don't spend a lot of time having conversations. They spend a lot more of their time playing, having, imaginary scenarios, things like that, playing with doll houses, playing with stuffed animals. And that's enormously helpful in therapy. And the CAC, since, we are doing that trauma-informed lens, we have the Safe from the Start program that is geared towards younger preschool age children. And then also in the Family Support Services program as well, is that they do hold an understanding of what's going on. The problem is their meaning-making system. So how they understand it and how it fits into how they see the world and how they fit into the world becomes problematic. What that means, that fancy meaning-making system, whatever, what that means is a child, developmentally speaking, until they get to usually like preteen adolescence, thinks of the world in a very concrete way. And they also think of the world from their point of view. So they have a really hard time seeing other people's points of view. And they also have certain expectations of caregivers, of adults around them, that the adults just know what's going on inside of them, which really makes sense because, the first years of a child's life, the caregiver is very attached and attuned, typically in an optimal environment, to that kid. You start off with an infant learning, you can learn how the different cries sound. So, oh, that cry means my baby is hungry versus that cry means my baby needs to be changed. And so constantly you're in this co-regulation with this infant. And what happens is developmentally, as the kid gets older and can start to speak, they're still in that place where they feel like their parents are kind of only there for them. And so then what happens is if their parent is dangerous or one of the parents is dangerous, the kid then internally develops this idea of, since the world is revolving around me, and developmentally that's appropriate, it's called concrete reasoning. If the world is revolving around me, my parent is changing their behavior because of something I did. And so you can see that meaning-making system of that I have the control over whether people are nice to me or not, really can wreak havoc then the older you get, because it's a belief that becomes immersed and habitual in its way of processing the world. So when you get older children who have developed that meaning-making system of it's my fault, or I had control over this, I just didn't do the right thing. If I had done the right thing, my parent wouldn't have responded that way, or my caregiver wouldn't have responded that way. It sets the child up then for later in life having continual issues with the way they see the world and the way the world works not being compatible. So when we talk about children having more trouble understanding and coping with violence, it's because children, birth to 18, are literally learning and laying down the foundation for their concept of the world. Is the world a good place, or is the world a bad place? And so that's what that bullet point is trying to capture, is that if a child grows up and thinks that the world is not a good place, then you get a whole set of behaviors and defenses for that kid, because the kid is coming to every new circumstance saying the world is not a good place. Whereas if you have a person who says that the world is a good place, they will have a whole different set of behaviors and way of approaching the world, which may actually be more in line with what you're looking for when you think of kids' behaviors at school and so forth. So just kind of wanted to put out there in a short little video about, there's some common misbeliefs about how children experience trauma. And these really are the facts, that they all are affected by witnessing violence and abuse. The younger the child, the more dysregulation you're going to see, which is where our Safe from the Start program really comes in. And children really do have that trouble understanding and coping with violence, because it affects the way they are able to experience every other situation that they're faced with on a daily basis. So again, please feel free, if you have any questions, let us know. Happy to answer them. But thanks for listening and thinking about the common misbeliefs and facts when children experience trauma.